McGraw Hill Audio presents The Social Impact Advantage: Win Customers and Talent by Harnessing Your Business for Good by Tynesia Boyea-Robinson, narrated by Julienne Irons. Forward. The future of business is delivering value to all stakeholders. Even before we sold And One, the company I co-led with some of my closest friends that grew into a $240 million global basketball apparel, footwear, and entertainment brand, I knew it was time to do something different. In our decade plus of building a global brand, we learned a lot about how business works. Not just what they teach in MBA classes, but what it actually takes to go from selling t-shirts out of the trunk of a car to competing successfully against Nike and other multi-billion-dollar businesses with way more resources. Among other things like smarts, hard work, and luck, and in our case, some race, gender, and class advantages I wasn't fully appreciative of at the time. And One was successful because we had a clear purpose that spoke to the hearts of our incredibly talented team. And One's mission was to become the #1 basketball company in the world. We would accomplish that by being the brand for ball players who talk trash and have the game to back it up. People love an underdog, and that was true not only for the 200 people who worked directly for And One, but also for our global distributors, suppliers, warehouse and financing partners, retailers, and of course, the millions of basketball players who saw themselves, or who they wanted to be on the court, in our brand. In addition to shared purpose and a great place to work, with a gym, full court hoops, yoga classes, and lots of family-friendly activities, And One shared the upside of building a successful brand with all of our employees through stock options. Following the lead of trailblazers like Patagonia and Ben & Jerry's, And One generated those profits responsibly, primarily by implementing a best-in-class code of conduct for all of our footwear and apparel suppliers, ensuring that 10,000 young women who worked in our supplies factories were paid fairly and treated well in safe and healthy working conditions. And One also donated 5% of its net profits, cumulatively more than $2 million, to youth and education programs that benefited our target customers. As a result of this culture and these practices, all of our team members, suppliers, and other partners felt vested in our collective success, so they stepped up in various ways to save our company from numerous life-threatening situations. When we sold And One, it didn't take long for the new owner, American Sporting Goods, to gut all of those responsible business practices. ASG turned a stakeholder-driven business into a shareholder-driven business, with only one shareholder. It's not surprising to me that And One as a brand has deteriorated largely into whatever happened to status, and that And One as a business is no longer a good bet for long-term shareholder value creation because it has been resold at least 3 or 4 times and has likely not produced any meaningful value for the rest of its stakeholders. My And One experience showed me both the power of delivering value to all your stakeholders and the perils of focusing exclusively on delivering value to shareholders. As I began the mental transition from And One, I wanted to find a way to support business leaders and investors seeking to practice this better way of doing business, better for themselves, better for their workers, better for their communities, better for the environment. Luckily, as with And One, I was joined by 2 of my closest friends, Bart Houlihan, And One's president, and Andrew Kasoy, an original And One investor and a Wall Street veteran. And together we co-founded the nonprofit B Lab in 2006. B Lab is best known as a certifier of B corporations, businesses that meet the highest standards of verified social and environmental performance, public transparency, and legal accountability to balance profit and purpose. The B stands for the benefit they create for all stakeholders: their customers, workers, suppliers, communities, and the environment. There are now more than 4,600 certified B corporations across 155 industries in 78 countries, including disruptors who have gone public at billion-dollar valuations like Allbirds and Guild Education, planet and people-first icons like Patagonia and Ben & Jerry's, and Fortune 500 multinationals like Danone North America and Natura, owner of The Body Shop. Beyond those businesses who have earned status as certified B corporations, the innovation that creates legal accountability to balance profit and purpose is now being used by more than 12,000 businesses. This was made possible after B-Lab and the community of certified B corporations helped pass laws in nearly 40 U.S. states, including Delaware, the legal home of the majority of publicly traded companies, and about a half-dozen countries, to create a new corporate structure called a benefit corporation, which upgrades the fiduciary duty of directors to include a requirement to consider the impact of their decisions on all stakeholders, not just shareholders. In one indication of mainstream market acceptance, BlackRock, the world's largest investor with more than $10 trillion in assets under management, recently announced in their 2022 proxy guidance to equity investors that they were generally supportive of management proposals to adopt Benefit Corporation's stakeholder governance structure. I am currently the CEO of Imperative 21, a network of allied organizations including B-Lab, the B Team, CECP, Chief Executives for Corporate Purpose, Common Future, Conscious Capitalism, the GIN, Global Impact Investing Network, Just Capital, and Participant Media, who believe the imperative of the 21st century is to transform our economic system so that it can fulfill its higher purpose to create shared well-being on a healthy planet. In short, we work in radical collaboration to shift the narrative about the purpose of business and to accelerate mainstream adoption of stakeholder capitalism as the next normal for business leaders. This trend toward credible stakeholder capitalism with true accountability for stakeholder performance is accelerating because of rising expectations of customers, workers, and investors. If you want to compete successfully for customers, talent, and capital, you need to do more than talk about purpose. You need to know how to deliver value to all your stakeholders. That's why this new book by Tynesia Boyea-Robinson is so important and useful. Tynesia Boyea-Robinson, or Ty, as she encourages those who know her to call her, knows what it takes to integrate this stakeholder orientation into day-to-day business decisions about how we as business leaders make money, spend money, and invest in people. Many people talk about stakeholder capitalism, ESG, sustainable business, impact investing, or social enterprise, but Ty actually knows what's behind this language. As you will hear, Ty has collected a career's worth of insights by operating at the intersection of business, government, and nonprofits. She knows what it takes to deliver value to all stakeholders, and this book has everything you need to build a great business by doing the same. More pointedly, 2 years into a long overdue racial reckoning, societal expectations to advance racial equity are rising. Through a group I've been involved with since June 2020, called WMRJ, White Men for Racial Justice, I've seen Ty help business leaders learn how to use their positions of power and influence to build businesses and a supportive economic system that works for everyone, regardless of where they were born or the color of their skin. With deep insights, contagious passion, and infectious humor, I've seen Ty help business leaders learn how to integrate an equity lens into every business decision, and, importantly, how to respond to understandable concerns that delivering on racial equity will be bad for white people. Ty has helped me and other business leaders see that the opposite is true. I wish I had had this book 15 years ago when I started B-Lab, or even better, when I was starting And1. I could have avoided many mistakes, and I would have been able to do so much more for my company and our stakeholders so much more quickly. A stakeholder orientation is better for your business, better for our humanity, and better for society. Proof is everywhere you look. For example, Just Capital, one of the Imperative 21 network steward organizations, found that public companies who deliver value to all their stakeholders outperformed Russell 1000 index companies by roughly 30%. As Ty says, your customers, and your current and potential employees, do really want you to be good. You can choose to meet this customer and employee demand and benefit from it, or you can ignore this trend and lose your customers and talent to another business. I'm glad you are listening to this book. Your customers will thank you, your employees will thank you, your investors will thank you, and most importantly, your children will thank you for for showing them what it looks like to live a life with purpose authentically at the center. J. Cohen Gilbert, entrepreneur and co-founder, And1 Lab, CEO, Imperative 21. Introduction. Harnessing the power of the moonshot mindset. Not many 16-year-olds get to work at NASA, but there I was, a summer high school intern working at the Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral. I was a part of SHARP, Summer High School Apprenticeship Research Program, working on the International Space Station Alpha ISSA initiative, and everywhere I looked were nerds, with pocket protectors, which I didn't even know anyone used. They talked in some kind of unique language, with acronyms for everything, and used words in new ways I didn't understand. It took me several weeks, for example, to realize payload was their word for satellite. The place, as I affectionately refer to it now, was a total nerd oasis, and I loved it. My first day there, they gave me a thick folder containing packets and booklets with the straightforward name of Information Kit. It contained massive amounts of paper. Yes, it was so long ago it was printed on paper, and contained things like the Kennedy Space Center Strategic Plan, a map of the series of buildings I had to navigate, a SHARP student handbook, and other documents that would help me understand what my job was and how I should do it. I lugged this kit around with me every day that summer. I spent my first days looking through this information to learn as fast as I could what was happening around me. One particularly helpful item was a thick little book that contained all those acronyms. Things like VAB, or the Vehicle Assembly Building, which was the building where they put the space shuttle together. Well, the book wasn't that little, but it fit in my purse. Whenever anyone used an acronym, I rushed to find out what it meant before someone used another. Part of my job was to take notes and measurements, as my team worked to open a new building to support the construction of the space station. The project was massive. We were literally working to put someone into space. Hard to believe that was me working at the place that put a man on the moon. It was at the same time humbling and inspiring. 2 essentials for achieving your goals: ambition and process. I learned 2 important lessons working with nerds. First, I was a nerd too. I had always been nerd curious, focused on my studies and gravitating toward the sciences. But, as a young black woman, I wasn't able to identify with nerd culture. A nerd was a skinny white man, not a short black girl. After working at NASA, I knew there was a place for me among the nerds. This insight helped me take every other step in my life. From studying engineering and computer science in college, to working in e-commerce at GE, and even running a technology-focused nonprofit a decade later. The second lesson I learned was related to that nondescript information kit. Everything was so complex, but that didn't mean everything had to be overwhelming. To my teenage mind, lugging that kit around with me each day seemed burdensome, but it actually represented a distillation of the massive amounts of logistical information and processes that went into building the space station. That manual walked me through all the possible complexities, from what certain acronyms meant to the process that would lead to discoveries, like how to assemble pieces in a way that would eventually create a machine that could sustain human life in space. While our goal was a literal moonshot, we had step-by-step plans that helped us build our shared vision. From the lowliest intern, me, to the most senior leader, we were undeterred by aiming for what had never been done and motivated by what we could create together. There were thousands of people working to launch International Space Station Alpha into space, all with various tasks and responsibilities. And each task, every step, was coordinated and integrated, even something as small as my measurement task, to achieve a broader, bold goal. Though my information kit may have seemed a burden at the time, I know now it was just as critical to the overall success of the shuttle launch as the external tanks and boosters that propelled the astronauts into space, or the oxygen that kept them alive. It was a part of a broader system of checklists and meeting structures and procedures that together led to the bold action of sending a person into space. Achieving bold results requires a moonshot mindset, but also an information kit, or 2, or 3. We tend to forget this when we are building businesses or trying to change society. When people achieve big things, they are called visionaries because of their big ideas. Steve Jobs brought us the personal computer through his genius. Albert Einstein brought us a whole new way to think about the universe. Martin Luther King Jr. inspired a nation to change. But while those men were visionaries, they also had hundreds and sometimes thousands of people working with them to achieve their big, bold goal. This dual appreciation of both the mindset and what it takes to achieve that mindset is missing from much of our work in business and society. We may focus too much on the end goal and not enough on setting the right targets to help us get there. We may have big ideas but be unable to execute on them, or undervalue the work that it takes to achieve them because we lack the information kit that will lead us the way to get there. If we can recognize and harness the power of both the moonshot mindset and the information kits it takes, we can build anything. We can change how we do business. We can change the world. From NASA to GE, moonshot mindness at work in a blue-chip corporation. My first job out of school was as an analyst at GE. GE was rapidly expanding then, acquiring companies left and right they felt would be a good fit for the company. Some of the aspects of the business seemed ludicrous. During my time there, I analyzed credit card services, mortgage banking, and the manufacture of locomotive engine parts. Looking back, the expansive and seemingly ridiculous portfolio of the fictional GE's vice president of East Coast Television, Jack Donaghy, from the TV show 30 Rock, was not very different from how the company operated. But as a young analyst at GE, I soon learned that while the products and services of GE's different business units might seem incongruous, there was always a common thread that tied everything together: process and culture. Their information kits were essentially the same, regardless of what you were working on. We received endless PowerPoint slides that walked us through any process, from acquiring a $2 million business to managing a team, supplemented with support from senior leaders and relentless training to build GE's version of moonshot mindset culture, which at the time translated to be the best or leave. This symbiosis of process and culture led to a high-performing workforce that didn't shy away from thinking big or doing what it took to execute on those big, bold plans. I was successful at GE. I became a Six Sigma black belt, learning the famed process improvement tools and techniques to help our business units grow and succeed at whatever we tried to do, whether it was an acquisition of a mortgage bank in Mexico or the rollout of new engine products for a high-speed train. I learned a lot in college, but at GE I was able to apply what I learned and see what I could achieve. I was making more money than my parents did, and I was on a trajectory to lead a business division in a short amount of time. So I did what most people in my position would have done. I went to business school to try to get to that next level. It's here where normally you would hear about how there was one moment where I stopped and looked around at my life and realized that I wasn't fulfilled in my corporate job, that I needed to give back and help others more than I was doing in a big, faceless multinational company. I will admit, as a black woman and the first in my immediate family to go to college, there were moments where I asked myself, whom did I leave behind to be successful? Whom did I betray or abandon? I was mindful of the platform I had as one of the few black women in GE, and I held some responsibility to do more because of that. But when I went off to graduate school, I fully expected to return to GE and run an international business unit, continuing on my path. I was happy where I was, and I knew that I was achieving big, bold things. But after a unique opportunity at business school, I realized that by using the tools and techniques I had learned at NASA and GE, I could aim for an even bigger moonshot. Shifting gears, moonshot mindness at work in a national nonprofit. My summer internship at business school was to support a growing national nonprofit, Year Up, as they developed a business and expansion plan. Year Up worked with young people who had graduated from high school but did not have many opportunities after that. They put them through training to receive college credits and set them up with apprenticeships in technology companies to help with project management, IT, and other tasks. I knew I could be of help because these kids were essentially preparing for my first job at GE. I must admit, I fell in love with Year Up. I saw myself and my family in every young person who walked through the doors. My summer project was to provide data on which regions of the country would be best targeted for expansion out of the Boston area, and the board was deciding between D.C. area and New York City. After I delivered my analysis to the board at Year Up, I thought I was done with the organization, and it was back to GE for me. In the end, I am grateful that the founder, Gerald Shartavian, a successful tech entrepreneur and Wall Street banker, had other ideas. The board ended up deciding on D.C. over New York City. With this decision made, Gerald called me into his office one day with the proposition. Once I graduated from business school, he asked me to come work with him as the founding executive director of the first national expansion into the D.C. area. I thought about it and realized I couldn't pass it up. These young adults were dealing with some of the hardest challenges a person could face in life. Many of them were working to provide for their families while trying to educate themselves and get a better job. Some had unstable housing situations and traveled hours by public transit just to get to work. They were not seen as the typical corporate employee, but Gerald and his team were working to change that. Creating the environment where talent and often overlooked youth could amass the experiences they needed to succeed seemed to some too daunting and impossible to achieve. But because of what I had learned at GE and what I had seen at NASA, I knew that it wasn't. The process was complicated, but it was doable. It just required the right information kits. Yet setting up and establishing these processes and procedures was harder than what I had experienced at GE or even NASA. We were tackling problems that wouldn't be fixed by reinforcing structures with different types of metal or through different lines of code. We were working to support youth who faced barriers to success that were deeply ingrained in the structure of our society. It required working with people to change their perceptions of who these young people were and to give them a chance they wouldn't have otherwise. Despite these challenges, I raised over $20 million, and we grew from placing 22 students in internships at 8 companies to placing over 1,000 students at over 40 internship partners, including the White House. I was one proud mama. Who wouldn't be? But one morning, after 7 years, I pulled up outside one of our nondescript offices on Wilson Boulevard in Northern Virginia. I looked up at the windows to the second floor of the office building where our staff was already working away. We had new hills to climb, more young people to serve, and more important work to do. And then I was hit by an unshakable feeling. I was not the one to take us there. The next moonshot, harnessing the power of social impact. Where did this feeling come from? I wanted to do the work at Year Up because, in part, I knew that the young adults we were helping were like me and my family. I came from a jumbled background of opportunity and disadvantage. On my dad's side, my grandparents were from Guyana and Japan. My mom's family was Black from Long Beach, California. My father was the youngest of 5 children, and his brothers and sisters are traditionally successful. Teacher, banker, marketing executive, engineer. As a teenage father, instead of going to college, my dad joined the military in order to support his young family. Meanwhile, my mom, and later my stepmom as well, came from families where no one had ever gone to college, women often had babies young, and everyone pitched in to raise the children. All of these factors shaped who I am today. My aunts and uncles and my paternal grandmother provided a lot of my initial upbringing. They took me to libraries and museums, where I discovered that the world was full of potential and possibility. They instilled in me the importance of education that would stay with me for the rest of my life. My dad's family showed me that there's a big world out there, and I was always looking for new opportunities to learn and grow. In contrast, my mother taught me to find joy and laughter in the midst of sadness, and to trust and believe in the good in the world, even when you have been hurt by those closest to you. My father and stepmom taught me discipline and responsibility. Under their roof, I learned to work hard, admit my mistakes, and channel my gifts towards something bigger than myself. As the firstborn child, niece, and granddaughter, I was given my first and best opportunity: the commitment, support, and love of a diverse family structure. What ran consistently through all my diverse familial upbringing was a headstrong notion that things can change if you push hard enough. My parents and their families were always pushing to secure a better life for me and my siblings, and they never accepted the idea that how life was is what it had to be. This belief laid the foundation for what would become my moonshot mindset and set me on the path to my career. It pushed me to learn as much as I could and try as hard as I could. If my professional experiences gave me the information kits I needed to get things done, it was my family that first instilled within me the moonshot mindset that helped me set my sights on what I wanted to achieve and to always go big. So, when I sat in my car in front of the Europe offices on Wilson Boulevard, it was this belief in change and my ability to do more that pushed me to move on. Europe was well on its way to achieving its moonshot, but I knew there was something else I needed to work on. My own moonshot. What I had seen at NASA, GE, and Europe was that the fundamental process for change was the same, no matter if that was a big change or something smaller. The work of assembling an engine for a train has the same fundamental components as trying to put someone into space. It just requires a different set of resources and scope of work. So I asked myself, while sitting in my car in front of the Europe office, if I knew how to achieve big things, why shouldn't I set my sights higher? Why not try to hit a bigger moon, higher in the sky? Changing how the world does business. During my time at Europe, I saw what it took to achieve substantive positive changes in the lives of people who needed them. At GE, I had seen what a company could do with the right processes and ambition to create a hugely successful business. I knew that the process behind both of those things was essentially the same. Yet I also saw that there was a siloed nature between the world of business and work that had social impact. Part of the reason I was so successful and raised so much money at Europe was because I was able to seamlessly move between the business world and the scrappy, out-in-the-streets nonprofit world. And while I was leading Europe National Campaign Region, I was out in the streets talking to anyone who would listen. There wasn't a corporate boardroom or wine and cheese gala I hadn't attended. I connected with the corporate leaders in D.C., many of whom were the people behind the first .com boom, because I could speak their language and translate what we were trying to do through Europe and why they should support it. But oftentimes, after I left those large houses in the Virginia suburbs and took off my high heels for the drive home, it astounded me that I needed a translator. Europe's work was about creating opportunities for young people and breaking down the barriers that society has set up for them. These geniuses of the internet were also breaking down barriers and creating opportunities. The difference was that they did it with technology. We were talking about the same things, so why didn't we all speak the same language? The reason for this divide between business outcomes and social outcomes is long-standing and deep-seated in our Western capitalist society. We have been living in an era defined by the Milton Friedman's maxim, "The business of business is business." Business leaders see their role as maximizing profit and creating the most value for their customers, employees, and shareholders. Why should they be concerned with anything else? With these profits, the corporate leaders who maximize profits can then choose to give their funds away to help improve society. The division of labor among the sectors has been essentially unchanged since the first major era of philanthropy began with people like J.D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie. But we are beginning to see those walls come down. Consumers are looking more and more toward businesses to be social and political leaders, and companies are facing increased pressure from boycotts and digital organizing to make statements in support of or against social causes. The millennial generation in particular is more interested in civic engagement and giving back, and is making consumption decisions based on those values. Yet businesses continue to treat social impact as a side dish rather than the main course of their operations. I saw this working with companies through Europe. Some saw our work with them as a charitable act, something they were doing to our students to help out disadvantaged youth. Few saw it for what it really was, or could be, a talent recruitment tool to gain highly qualified staff with a high probability for long-term retention. Europe was offering something that broke down the silo between business and nonprofits. It gave companies a chance to improve their bottom line while also improving society. Time and time again I saw this offer accepted, but without companies understanding what it really meant for them. I knew that until the business community saw things like Year Up for what they really were, a true win-win, we would not only fail to solve society's biggest challenges, but also fail to unleash the true power of business and the capitalist engine that drives it.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?